Your mood is better. You're thinking better. You have more energy so that you can move your body, exercise. You feel better, so you want to meet people. So your social life, starts improving. Mood and food are so connected. The moods that we're in affects the foods that we eat, and the foods we eat can affect the moods that we have. So sort of putting all of this together in a very holistic approach and having somebody kind of guide you in that right direction, you can really see transformation happening.
Suzy Wood is an integrative nutrition health coach, and I invited her to be a guest because I wanted to learn more about how healthier food choices contribute to better balance in my life and therefore my overall well-being. I don't know about you, but summer is when I tend to get a little relaxed. I may be eating a bit more ice cream than usual or indulging in an extra glass of wine a bit later into the evenings. And I'm feeling it. I feel out of balance. I just notice my body is not at its best internally. And I know it's because I need to make better choices. Suzy says that we have the power to change what's out of balance and that the true work comes from within. But it also helps to have an outsider's perspective to not only keep us accountable, but to also better our chances of achieving our health goals. Suzy looks at her clients' nutrition and wellness goals holistically by starting with a circle of life activity, a process which reminds me of how I would look at a client's space utilizing the Bagua energy map. We're not just looking at one aspect of your life, we're looking at all areas and how they are impacting your stress level and contributing to any imbalance. Proper food and nutrition is just one piece of life's pie. So please enjoy today's conversation with Suzy Wood. Suzy, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I've been really looking forward to our conversation. So thank you again for being here.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You are an integrative nutrition health coach. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, but also learning from you. I've dabbled in and out of good nutrition over the years. And I'd say right now, I could be doing a little better. I think after I had kids is probably when I was at my healthiest. I did like a beach body program. I was eating extremely clean. But then I'd say COVID happened and I'm working from home. And so I've definitely become a little more lazy.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, there's so many life challenges that we experience, and whether it's COVID, it's kids, kids going off to college, like there's all these changes in our lives. And, I mean, looking at a holistic approach is really the way to do it, because with integrative nutrition, it's not just food that makes us healthy. We have to look at what's going on in the rest of our lives. So there's that to consider as well.
Yeah, I love that you say that because, I have this philosophy of mind, body, home. I believe it's like that sacred trinity that supports our spirit. So typically you see it mind, body, spirit, but I really feel like it's the sum of those three that contribute to our overall well-being, which I believe is the spirit. And so I find not only for myself, but even with clients, that maybe one of those is out of balance a little bit, right? For
Right.
me, and I'd say for me right now, it's the body piece. Like I
Mm.
was just telling a friend, I feel really great mentally. My home feels in order. But it's like my body needs to catch up a little bit.
Right. Well, it's like you said, I mean, I love that mind, body, and home. It's such that your home is just, you spend so much time there. And it's also like our private space. Like that's where we can just sort of like be ourselves, and we're not out in public and like putting on this persona. And if there's something that isn't going right in your home, I mean, that just affects so much in our lives. But I like that trilogy that you have with the body and the mind as well.
I know that finding balance is also a key to your coaching
Yes.
style and specifically around nutrition and self-care. One of the reasons I started this podcast was kind of selfishly, I wanted to learn from others, like how are people balancing at home? How
Yeah.
do they, manage the household, the kids, the job, the business, all those things. Um, so what can you share? What has been really helpful for you in your own life or in your coaching business?
Well, I mean, I always start out with my clients doing an activity called the Circle of Life, and it's a really simple activity, but it's very telling. And within integrative nutrition, there's 12 key lifestyle factors that need to be in balance in order for us to really feel holistically healthy. And often people think of nutrition as being food. And like I said before, it's not food alone that makes us healthy. We can eat salad till the cows come home. That doesn't mean that we're healthy if other areas of our lives are out of balance. So similar to your trilogy thing, right? If something's out of balance, we just feel off. And so some of the 12 areas that are part of the circle of life, home environment is huge. Our physical activity, our education, our career, spirituality. These all have to be within balance in order for us to make better food choices. So you can imagine if your home environment, as an example, that's what we're talking about. If something isn't right, if the lighting isn't right, if you just don't feel like you're in a clean space, if it's cluttered, then that's going to cause some anxiety or some unease in your life. And that unease or stress can lead to poor food choices. So there's a connection. You can apply the same thing with relationships or with your career. If they're out of balance, then that's going to lead to stress. And then you could be eating foods that you don't want to eat, or it's throwing your sleep off, which then affects your mood and also your cravings because now you haven't slept well. So now you need some energy boosters in the morning, and then maybe you need to wind down in the evening, maybe with alcohol or things like that. So it is really a holistic approach of looking at all these different areas. And I can definitely think of examples from clients where their home environment hasn't been working for them and it causes a lot of stress. So one of my very first clients, she drank a ton of soda. She was always drinking Coke Zero, and she knew that it was bad for her. She knew she wanted to stop drinking it, but she didn't really know where to start. And so we sat down, we started doing the circle of life. And it turned out that actually she was going through, it was after COVID, and her home environment really wasn't working for her. She had two little girls. They were doing tons of art projects. Her entire dining room table was taken over. We can all understand this as parents, right? Taken over by art projects. So they couldn't even eat as a family at their dining room table. She also worked from home. So her home office, she had a bed in her home office, and that was basically her file cabinet. So stuff was kind of all over the place. She didn't really have a good recycling system. So she'd get all the mail, she'd have all these packages and boxes and things, and it would always end up in the house and it just causing more clutter. And she had closets that were just busting with clothes and jackets and things that her kids had outgrown. And so we actually get together a plan for her to clean up her home and make her home environment a better, more conducive place. And it took about 6 weeks. She installed shelving. She put a recycling system in. She cleared off her dining room table. She organized the mail. She went to the recycling center, donation center, dropped up all this stuff. And then she was like, okay, now let's talk about the Coke Zero. So you can
Mm.
see how your home environment and just a stressor. For her, it happened to be her home environment, but that was a stressor in her life that was causing her anxiety. And then she wasn't really able to focus on other areas of her life. For example, the food that she was eating or the soda that she wanted to get off of. So it does play a huge role in our lives, and we have to figure out how we can balance it. We don't always realize it when we're living it. So having
That's
that
so
outside
true.
perspective is really helpful.
For sure. When you said she knew she didn't want to be drinking it, she knew it wasn't good for her. I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think we do a
Yeah.
lot of things we know aren't good for us. Why? What is like the block from like sometimes I say there are times in my life, depending on, what area of life I'm even talking about. I feel like I sit on the spectrum of awareness to action, right?
Mhm.
Like it's like I have this awareness that this isn't really a positive thing in my life. But it's like we have to sit in this weird middle section of life before we actually take the action. Why is that? Like, do you have a theory about that? Because I
I
think
mean,
that's the key to like taking
yeah.
action.
I mean, food is pleasurable, and it should be. I mean, I'm not a proponent of any particular diet. I don't encourage my clients to go vegan or go keto or whatever. It's really what works for them. But food is meant to be pleasurable. And I actually am self-identified foodie. I love good restaurants. I love to cook. I like really good quality foods. And my philosophy is that if 80 or 90% of the foods that you're eating are good, and I'm talking clean ingredients, you're not having processed foods, not having soda, not having tons of sugar, well-balanced meals, lots of fruits and vegetables, good quality proteins, nuts and seeds, which give you good quality fats. If 80 to 90% of your meals are in that category, then the next 10 to 20%, if you have, the occasional cake, if you have the glass of wine, if you have the ice cream, it's fine. Right? It's sort of like we can't just look at anything in isolation, like, oh, I ate a candy bar, like I'm bad. Like we're so used to all of this negative self talk about food, and we shouldn't criminalize it. I mean, I enjoy sweets every once in a while, but again, I'm in the sort of 90% category. 90% of what I eat is very clean. So when I have something else, I don't think of it as, oh, it's a treat. I don't even call it that. It's like, no, I feel like having a brownie. So I'm going to have a brownie. And that's perfectly fine. But I work really, really hard and I teach my clients in a way that we get them to that point where like most of the things that they're eating are pretty good. Really clean ingredients, like I said, lots of colorful vegetables, lots of vitamins, good quality protein, good quality food, no fast food, processed foods, and things like that. Then you're just enjoying food, just living your life and enjoying food. And we don't label these foods as good foods or bad foods because I think that just starts messing with us. And then, if you ate a bad food, does that mean that you're bad? Like, no, I don't want to get into that. But that's just not a way I want to live my life. I'm eating a brownie and it tastes good. And I don't classify that as a bad food. It's just like, that's what I'm going to eat. And I've worked hard and with the other foods that I'm eating. So that's totally acceptable for me to have that, or
Yeah.
ice cream or the glass of wine.
I can appreciate that. I have definitely taken that approach too. And what another thing I've done is really just portion control. I think that we get into such a habit of eating the same portion of things all the time. Like recently, an example, I take these cues from my daughter. I always said she eats like a bird. She just like nip, 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 and she's done. And she was like that even when I breastfed her. She was very different from my son. My firstborn, he would sit there all day if I let him.
Uh-huh.
My daughter, she was like 30 seconds and then she was off. And I was like,
Right.
okay, what do I do with all this milk?
Start
Totally
pumping.
different. Yeah, it was a totally different experience. Um, but I take these cues from her and watch her eat. And she's very diligent about, no, I've had enough. Like she knows I'm done. Um, the recent example I was going to say, eggs, I would always make myself 2 eggs, piece of toast, maybe a little side of fruit. And I thought,
Mhm.
do I really need 2 eggs? So I tried it and I knocked it down to 1 egg and I was
Yeah.
fine. Like I was totally
Right.
satisfied.
Sure.
And I was like, where else could I do this? Like, where else am I overeating? I think you
Yes.
hear that as a culture in, at least the US, that we tend to overeat. But even when we got to a restaurant, like my husband and
Mm,
we've started splitting entrees because it's
we do
just so
that too.
much food, you
So much
know?
food. I know people kind of confuse the quantity versus the quality. And it's so easy to do that in restaurants. I mean, that's a great habit that if you order a plate, you basically cut it straight in half and just say, bring me a box. You can box it up right then and there. So you
Mm.
only are left with half, which is often enough food for us. I mean, we do tend to, eat with our eyes and we over order and we start with an appetizer and the portions are just enormous. If you travel other places in the world, the portions are just as big as they are in the United States typically. But we do that at home as well. And for people who do have that issue where they feel like they're overeating, I often talk about a concept that's called crowding out. And so if you fill your plate with fiber rich foods, so think of all the vegetables, tons of fiber in there, that really keeps you full. And so if you're eating like a nice big salad with a good quality dressing, not dousing it in one of these like high fat, poor ingredient dressings, having all of that fiber from the vegetables in the salad is going to help you feel full. And then there's a bit of a pause. And then by the time you get your entree, you just literally don't have room to eat as much as you would have. And so eating slowly, crowding out by having fruits and vegetables, because fruits also have a lot of fiber in them as well, that can make the portions of your main course a little bit smaller just because you've already eaten and you're starting to feel full. From protein keeps us full and fiber keeps us full. So it's kind of identifying what foods you're eating. And the like having straight carbs, sort of the pastas and the breads and things like that, that doesn't really fill us. It doesn't keep us full. And so we tend to overeat those foods more so than like a salad. Like how many times have you said, "Oh, I just ate way too much salad today"? I mean, said nobody ever.
Right.
I really overdid it with broccoli. Like, no, nobody has ever said,
Right. Oh, the breads.
right?
Just this morning, I threw away. We tend to buy more bread than we need. It's like we have the bagels, we have the sandwich loaf, we have a particular bun that they like with their deli sandwich. It's like, why do we need all this bread?
Yeah. Well, the typical American diet is definitely very refined carb centric. There are good carbs. I mean, everything is, can be good for us, but it's just in what kind of quantities. And so having all of these refined carbs, which are there's the processed white bleached flours, like you're talking about the bagels, the pastas, your typical sandwich bread, there's really almost no nutrition in there. So it's much better to look for whole grain ingredients if you're going to be having those things. So there's lots of breads on the market that have tons of nuts and seeds. I have no affiliation with them, but I love like Dave's Killer Bread. If you've heard of that brand, that's got
Yeah.
lots of nuts and seeds. Can be some of them can be a little bit high on the sugar side, so you just have to watch that. Or there are crackers out there like what's it called? Mary's Gone Crackers. They're literally just seeds and they're kind of baked into like a little cracker and you're getting all the benefits of the nuts and the seeds. I don't think they're nuts, actually, it's just seeds. Um, those are good quality fats, good omega-3 fatty acids. And you kind of have that crunch if you want like a cracker. Like that's usually what I end up going for rather than like refined processed white flour like you find in like cereals and bagels and typical bread. So there's things that we can do to kind of alter that, but we tend as Americans to have a very carb centric diet. And again, it goes back to having lots of fruits and vegetables, good quality protein, good quality fats, from things like, avocado, nuts and seeds, good quality oils, avocado oil, olive oil, avoiding some of the processed seed oils. That's also really important because they're highly inflammatory and that just does a whole number on our inside of our bodies.
Yeah. So I know you're a mother. So how do you get the kids to engage in better eating? Like my kids, instead of coming home and grabbing, maybe a yogurt or fruit, they want to go for the chips and the fruit snacks and all the highly processed stuff, which I try to limit even having in the house. And I'd say we do a pretty good job, but
Yeah.
being a parent, I always want them to do better. So like, how do you engage them? Well, I will say, well, one, I want to hear from you. How do you engage the kids more? But I will say my son has just started showing an interest in cooking. And I think that's helping. Like he made his
Yep.
own salad and now he loves salads. So that's one
Wow.
thing that's one
Yeah.
takeaway I have from that. But I'm curious what you have to
Yes.
say.
I'm definitely going to piggyback on what you said, just involving them in cooking. When they start chopping the food, I kind of joke, like give them the onion to chop. It's just, that might turn them off. But,
Yeah.
but bring them in the kitchen. Like, why should I be the only one that's cooking here? They can cut up vegetables. They can learn how to use a knife carefully at a certain age. Every parent has to determine,
Right.
what the appropriate age is. But, they can open up the can of beans and drain that. They can boil the water, right? Learn how to do all those basic things. But involving them in the kitchen, it's like the same for like painting. If you gave them a painting and said, "Oh, isn't this great?" They'd kind of go like, "Yeah, whatever." But if they painted it, oh my God, it's a masterpiece, right? So it's the same with cooking. Involve them. Let them make that first tomato sauce. I started out with really easy things like scrambled eggs with my kids. I showed them how to beat the egg. Yes, they made a mess, of course. Like they're not going to have a pristine kitchen at the end of this process. I have two boys. So
Mm.
yes, we had a lot of messes. We had a lot of food on the floor. But you know what? That's the sacrifice because now they both actually do cook for themselves. Especially they're a little bit older. They're 17 and 19. But especially my older one has taken a really, really strong interest in food and he cooks all of his meals. He's in college. He even uses like the pots and pans. He brought himself the pot and pan set. He uses it in his dorm. They have a shared kitchen in their dorm. He goes and buys his food when he's sick of the cafeteria food. But yeah, involving them and, there's also some great movies out there. So, kids usually like, TV and, anything on their phone is kind of an easy sell. But you could have a family movie night. Hey, I heard this, don't call it a documentary because that might turn them off. But there's a movie on Netflix where we can all sit and watch. And I mean, there's some that are really eye opening, like Super Size Me is all about McDonald's and how a guy
Mm.
for 30 days ate McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then he was meeting with doctors and he was measuring all this stuff with his health. And I mean, it was bad. He gained like 30 pounds in, a few weeks. Yeah, it's a really good movie, Super Size Me. There's Seaspiracy that's all about the oceans, the fish we eat. There's Cowspiracy that's about meat production. I mean, there's so many, and they're on Netflix. Most people have access to that. They can just learn about the foods and they can have a discussion. It doesn't mean that you're never going to eat seafood or have meat, but just like, hey, this is a discussion. Like, wow, this is where our food is coming from. This is how it's grown. This is what's happening to the land. Um, here's another concept like, oh, here's vegetarian ideas. Oh, here's keto ideas, and you've come up with your own opinion. It doesn't mean just because it's in the movie, it's right, but it opens up a discussion about food and bring them to the supermarket, right? Have them pick out the stuff. I mean, they might not want to do it all the time, but it's also part of life. How are they going to know what's on sale and how are they pricing things? And, they can calculate percentages if you have kids who are new to learning those math skills. That's a great place to do math with them.
Those are all
So,
great
yeah,
tips. I
yeah,
don't mind using the word documentary. My son actually loves documentaries. Like, it's
there you go.
funny.
Then you,
Yeah. I sat down and watched The Social Dilemma with him,
oh, yeah.
which I didn't realize, like, it was probably a little inappropriate for his age at certain points. But, we watched a little bit of it and he, like, immediately deleted YouTube off his phone. He was
Oh,
like, "I
wow.
don't need this." I mean, it's back on there, but I will say it planted
More
a
careful
seed.
though.
Yeah, he's more careful. He's a little bit more mindful about his
Yeah.
usage. I think it definitely
Yeah.
planted a seed. So I love those tips for kids.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there was a fun I went to do a wellness talk at a 3rd grade, class a few months ago, and so I brought in a whole bunch of packaged foods, of course, things that they would have, those little fruit chewy things, candy bars and Pringles, things like that. So I gave them the packages and I said, "Okay, we're gonna play a game, we're gonna have a contest. Who can read the ingredients the fastest?" And so, who's a really good reader, so you get the ooh, ooh, ooh kids, right? So I gave the package to this one boy. I mean, it was literally like a chemistry textbook. It was like the index of a chemistry textbook on the back of this package. And he's reading, disulfate monoglycer. Like, I mean, he could barely get these words out. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't either. What are you eating? I think it was Gushers, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, what are you actually putting in your body? And
Yeah.
it's a kind of a concept for 3rd graders. It was a bit out there, but food is medicine.
Mm.
What you put in your body is going to, really affect how you perform. If you're an athlete, if you just want to get through the day, your concentration. So, I mean, these are concepts we can, do age appropriately with our kids. But if they're at the point where they can start reading and they can flip those packages over, I always say the front of the box is the advertisement. The back of it is really what's in the foods. So look at those ingredient labels, read what's there. You should be able to pronounce everything in there. So if it's like a dried fruit thing, like maybe instead of Gushers, like there are other products out there that, are just fruit. I mean, make sure it's fruit, not, these chemical ingredients with yellow number whatever and blue number 4 and, all of that stuff that they're chemicals. And I don't know. I don't want to eat chemicals. I want to eat real food.
Sure.
And I want that for my kids too. And the earlier they learn that, the better.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious what drives someone into their profession. So what was your journey into this? Like, why food? Why nutrition? Why coaching?
Yeah. Well, I had started out my career in high tech marketing years ago, and I worked in that field for a long time. And then I took a break to raise my kids. I actually lived abroad for many years and then came back to the States. And I just was kind of tired of going back into that field. I just wanted to do something else. And I've always been interested in nutrition and healthy living. And I actually lived abroad a lot as a kid. We lived in Brazil, in Japan, and then London as an adult for 11 years. And my husband at the time was from South Africa. So we had a lot of experience going to South Africa. So I had a lot of experience of like being in different cultures, seeing how they live their lives. I mean, just in little glimpses, from my experiences. And I noticed how different cuisine is in all of those different places, plus all the places that I traveled in. And I love different flavors, combining different flavors. So that was always the food element. I grew up in a very foodie household too. My mother always loved to cook. made lots of fresh, foods for us. So that was kind of the food side of it. And the lifestyle part, just living in all these different countries and seeing how people live their lives. And I feel like I kind of put all of that together. And then when I came back to the States in 2016, I kind of just had a new start. I was like, I just want to do something different. And I've always been interested in nutrition. So I re-educated and became an integrative nutrition health coach. And then I started my company, which is True Wellness Within. And I've just loved it. I love helping people, making small changes, not doing anything super drastic, but just working with them at their speed to just make healthier habits and realize, what's going on in the food industry. So there's a lot of education there and helping them with behavior change, because that's really what all of this is about. Because as adults, we're set in our ways and it is really hard to change. And sometimes you just need that outside perspective, like we were talking about with that early client. She didn't realize that her home environment was kind of holding her back from all these other areas of her life of eating well. But sometimes just having that outside perspective of somebody saying, well, let's look at everything together. What's going on? Where's your career? What's your relationships? I'm not a therapist, but we just touch on all of these different areas and then you see what's stressing the person out. And then we start making a plan so that they can reduce that stress. And ultimately, that really leads to better eating. Our food cravings do come from the stresses in our lives. If you're stuck in a bad job and you're not getting along with your boss, you're in a bad relationship, things like that, they cause stress and then that affects our food choices. So it was sort of putting all of this together and I found integrative nutrition and that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. No, feng shui is very similar in the sense as we look at the life holistically and the different areas that are playing out for you. And same thing, I just recently had a client who really wanted to work on her career and being seen a little bit more as she was trying to evolve in her business and being seen more as an expert and not just what she's always been in the past. And so we were, from her perspective, it was very much focused on that, on the career. What's not working in my career? Why am I not being seen? Why can't I hit that financial ceiling? But really, her home, looking at it from the whole, she really had this extension of, we call it the helpful people section. And that's where you can invite, others, mentors, guides, whether they're on the physical plane or spiritual plane, like what's your spiritual practice, right? And, she had a strong section of that in her living space. And so it was like, okay, so who in your life is not supporting you? Where are you not pulling resources from? And so
Right.
same thing. It's just that outside perspective to kind of give you a different lens to look through to help guide
Yeah.
what you're really going after. But there's always
Yeah.
something else playing out that can be
Right.
supportive. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the same approach to food, like what I was saying, that there's no bad food. We're so used to hearing it from the quote wellness industry that, you can have this food, you can't have that food. We put all these foods on, the blacklist. I mean, there are, I would say, as far as a clean diet, yes, there are definitely foods we want to avoid, but looking at it from a different perspective, let's stop beating ourselves up because that causes so many problems with food, like, oh, I'm going to have a cheat day. Well, you don't need a cheat day if you're basically always eating healthy. Like, let's, right? I mean, the more healthy you eat, then that's like crowding out concept. Like, you eat more and more healthy, you actually like those foods because your body's actually feeling better. You have lower inflammation, your mood is better, your clarity, you're thinking better, you're feeling better, you have more energy so that you can move your body, exercise, right? You feel better. So you want to meet people. So your social life, starts improving, right? Mood and food are so connected. The moods that we're in affects the food that we eat and the foods we eat can affect the moods that we have, right? So sort of putting all of this together in a very holistic approach and having somebody kind of guide you in that right direction, and you can really see transformation happening.
yeah, my husband views food as fuel. Now he's not like super fit, but he eats what he knows fuels his body. He doesn't really eat for taste and enjoyment. Now he does. He
Mhm.
will also, self-proclaim as a foodie. Like when we travel, he loves to go to cities specifically to eat foods,
Mhm.
and try things that he sees on like Travel Channel, like
Right.
diners, dives, and drives. He's like, I want to go
Yes.
try it. I want to go to
Yes.
this place. So he's a foodie in that sense, but in everyday living, I mean, he'll slam a smoothie and that's it. And he'll eat dinner and that's it. And it works for him. And I think that's part of it too. I think that you've got to find something that works for you too. And I think
Absolutely.
having someone like yourself help identify what works for you is really
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, it's not my job to tell you what to do. Like, who wants that? You have to come up with those ideas yourself. That's actually why I named my company True Wellness Within, because it has to come from within. It's not my job to tell you what to do or tell anybody what to do or how to eat. It's got to work for you. So, if, it's not even just about food. It's about how you're living your life. You want to come up with an exercise plan. Okay. Well, what's going to work for you? What do you like to do? Me telling you that you have to do Pilates. Well, you don't like Pilates. Okay, great. Well, I like kickboxing. Great. Do kickboxing. Whatever it is, like, you come up with a thing that excites you. And it's the same with a meal plan. That's why I don't say, you have to go vegan or you have to go keto or you have to do the Mediterranean. I mean, Mediterranean diet is a health. It's not really a diet. It's just sort of a way of eating. But, there's so many diet plans. The wellness industry has really not done us any favors. They make us think that we have to buy this certain food or we have to buy this certain, contraption to make the food or cook it or shake it or whatever. And, it's just a money making operation. We have to really just think about, take it back to basics. Eat real food.
Right.
Right? I
And
mean,
you could
like,
sum
it
it up in
can't
that, right?
be more simple than that, right? Again, it goes back to reading those ingredients. And I mean, if the third graders are like, "What's polysorbate?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore, like I always say, like, depending on the person's age who I'm talking to, your grandmother or your great grandmother should be able to recognize if they saw that food, they should be able to know what it is, like, and recognize it and be able to pronounce the ingredients. Did your great grandmother know what a Pop Tart was? I don't think so. Right? She
What
knew
a
what
great
chicken was, though.
example.
She knew
Yeah.
it was chicken, right? She knows Brussels sprouts.
Too funny. That's a great example, actually. You mentioned you traveled globally and lived in other parts of the country. So back to sort of this idea of finding more holistic balance in our lives. I'm curious, what's been your experience globally and what have you taken from those maybe that you've integrated into your own life?
So one thing that I thought was really interesting when I was living in England, I was really into horticulture and gardening, and I was volunteering at like a botanic garden. And the person who was running this particular department, we were talking about sports in the United States. And he said, I find it really interesting that as kids, they're so into sports. I mean, the parents are driving all over the place and flying all over the place, going on these travel teams, and like the kids are really, really involved. And then once they become adults, they become spectators. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. That's really interesting. There are very few adult leagues, sport teams in the United States. I mean, there are some. I'm not going to say that there aren't any, but you can understand where I'm coming from here. Like, the kids are super, super, super active, and then they become adults, and they literally sit on a bench and eat hot dogs, or whatever the game day food is, right, at the stadium. And so in England, they have tons of, they call them leisure centers, which is the closest thing. It might be like a YMCA type of thing, or YWCA that we might have in the United States. But there are tons of leagues that adults can join and all sorts of different sports, master swimming classes and basketball leagues and all sorts of things. And sport plays a much more critical role in the adult life in the UK. And I thought that was like a really interesting observation because it's kind of true. Like, adults, maybe you'd play tennis with some friends. Like, there are the active people, but the majority of American adults really don't move that much. Maybe they go to the gym, but there's so much more to sports. Like, there's the social aspect, right? There's that continuity because, like, oh, we got a game every Monday or we have practice or whatever. There's like that consistency. And we don't really have that. So I thought that was interesting. And as far as food, I find this really interesting. In Japan and in France, there are no children's menus. You go to a restaurant, you eat what's there. Like, it's not like here you go to, basically almost any restaurant and there's a designated children's menu. And what's on the children's menu? A bunch of crap, pretty
Yep.
much. Chicken nuggets, bowl of pasta with butter, I don't know, a hamburger, grilled cheese. I mean, really low nutrition food, fried. Again, those refined carbs. So, what are we teaching our kids as Americans from a really young age? That, first of all, there has to be special food for them. Why? I don't know. Like, why can't we introduce our kids to grilled chicken and a little side of vegetables. I mean, so I understand, kids don't want to sit down to a plate of vegetables, like very rare, like your son, to sit down and have a salad. Okay, that's not most kids don't do that, but there are ways that we can introduce fruits and vegetables, to our kids, but they can sit and they can have a grilled chicken or a piece of fish. It doesn't have to be deep fried. It doesn't have to be shaped into a dinosaur for it to be palatable for our children. And we're doing them a very big disservice because now we fed them all of this pizza, chicken nuggets, hamburgers, grilled cheese, mac and cheese. And then we expect them to somehow know how to eat healthy when they boom, now you're an adult, eat healthy. Well, I've had no training in that. I don't know how to do that. I don't like those foods. I've never tasted broccoli or peas or eggplant or something like that. So we really have to think about that. Like they don't do that in the other countries. And you look at typical, I mean, this is all on averages, but French children and Japanese children, like they eat a much healthier diet than American children do. So again, think about that. It goes into another one of the things that we can do with our kids. Introduce them to real food. Again, eat real food,
Yeah.
right? Start it from a young age. I mean, I'm also a big fan if I do cook at home, if I'm making a bolognese, I put tons of vegetables in there. I don't care if it's not a traditional bolognese, it's my bolognese. So maybe I put beans in there, make a big stew, you can hide foods, you can hide, add extra tomatoes. I make tacos, let's say. Nothing wrong with tacos. In the big meat sauce, I shred carrots, a great extra onion. I put lots of garlic in there. Maybe I put in some beans and I smush it with the back of the spoon so that it just blends into the sauce. It makes it a thicker sauce. I don't use those packet spices. I add my own seasoning. You can add corn in there. You can put bits of zucchini. You chop anything up small enough, you could barely see it. Put a little bit of mushroom in there. And the kids eventually, that's what's on offer. Like, no, I'm not going to make you the dinosaur shaped chicken nuggets. This is what's for dinner.
I'm
And if
kind
you
of
have an issue with it, then, then maybe they can help make the dinner the next time and they can
Yeah.
make something that they like that, hopefully is not chicken nuggets.
I'm sort of giggling over here as you're saying hiding the food because my daughter, that she finds every speck. Every
Uh-huh.
speck. Like if I just, topped her pasta with a little bit of parsley,
Uh-huh.
finely grated or finely chopped parsley. She's like,
Yeah.
what is this? Is this spinach? She calls me out on it. So there are
Well,
some
that's an
difficulties
obvious
out
one
there.
because it's green and red. Like that's really obvious. But I make sweet potato brownies and my
Yeah.
kids love them. I've brought them to people who are the biggest skeptics ever. And they're like, these are really good. What's in them? And I'm like, do you want me to tell you or do you want to just keep eating it? And then I do tell them and they're like, no way. There's sweet potato in here. You can make spinach brownies. I have recipes on my website. People can get recipes. But, you can do lots of creative things. And, maybe it's not the parsley on top of the sauce that's obvious, but maybe there's, just extra tomato in there, right? Or red pepper. Red pepper and tomato, they're going to look the same, but now you've given her another vegetable in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're all great tips. And I certainly don't mean to make this like a episode about how to teach the kids to eat. But at the same time, like you were saying, these stressors, I mean, sometimes for families, having to feed the kids who are very picky, it
Yeah.
does create a stress. And some days you just want to give up. You're like, whatever, go ahead, eat the nuggets. And then you end up, eating the last 2 nuggets on the stove.
Off the plate. Exactly.
Yeah. So it is.
Right.
It's definitely
It's
something
a
that a lot of people
balance.
face.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say raising my kids, it wasn't perfect in my house
Yeah.
either, for sure. But there's lots of things that we can do and just make our home environment, a healthier, happier place and just avoiding those arguments and fights and stressors, which, then cause us to, go in a whole other direction. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
So before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to just talk a little bit about how people can find you. But I guess for those listening, what would intrigue someone to reach out? And do you find a lot of your clients start with the nutrition in the food? Like in your first example, you said it started with soda, but we found so much more. Do you see people reaching out for other things?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people have come to me because they've gotten a diagnosis from their doctor and they know that they need to make some dietary changes. Most of the people I work with just want to make healthier food choices, but people can reach out to me. They can come to my website, truewellnesswithin.com. And if they're interested in recipes, I have a page on my site that's truewellnesswithin.com/easy recipes. And there's a little booklet of really simple make ahead recipes, lots of vegetables, varieties. The sweet potato brownies, those are in there. And I help mostly women with food issues. We do look at all sorts of lifestyle factors, as I mentioned, and making sure that things are in balance. So approach it from, a holistic point of view and just get them to a healthier place and a happier place so that they're just, living their best life.
Love it. Suzy, it was so great to connect with you, and thank you for all your expertise. And
Great.
yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
This conversation has me inspired to connect back to my body in a much healthier way. I want to get back to clean eating, working out regularly, and so forth. I mentioned in last week's episode that my family and I are getting ready to move cross country in a few weeks. And so I'm making health a top priority once we get settled in. The timing is really perfect too. To me, fall feels like the beginning of the new year in a sense. New Year's resolutions never really resonated with me, to be quite honest. I enjoy basking in the holiday season a bit past the new year. And I enjoy being in the water phase of winter. Water is one of my dominant elements next to wood. And speaking of the elements, the autumn season is connected to the metal element. And we just had autumn equinox this past Saturday, September 23rd, depending on when you're listening. And so we can harness that energy to support us. Like scissors, we can cut out what's no longer working and get more organized. For me, that's getting back into my health routine, cutting out the sugars and the sweets in the drinks. And so, what could that be for you? What are you ready to let go of? The metal element and the fall season offers great support here. If you need a bit more help getting your life in balance, check out Suzy's website, truewellnesswithin.com. There's a lot she can help you with, whether it's healthier eating, weight loss, better sleeping, balancing your hormones, reducing overall stress, or maybe just experiencing more joy. Of course, I too offer services to help you bring more balance and harmony into your life. If you'd like to approach it from the lens of home, be sure to also check out my website, jadescottdesign.com, for more information on feng shui services. I also have a free resource on ways to instantly uplift your home's energy, fall being a great time to do some zhuzhing around the home. You can get that guide at the link in the show notes, as well as links to both mine and Suzy's websites, including her free recipes. Those sweet potato brownies sound perfect for fall. As always, your shares, reviews, and subscribes make a huge impact on the growth of my podcast, so please be sure to do one or all of those if you're getting any value from this content. Until next time, much love and gratitude.